Another day, another fickle spring weather season. It's been all over the place these days, but such is the Midwest. Today, I wanted to get back into my recommendations by page length. So we are in, here comes Nugget. Come in. We are in the latter half of what I would consider the mid-sized range of books, which is 400 to 500 pages. And as I look in my recommendations, most of which I have here, a couple I do not have, I feel like this length is obviously at this point, everything's a very full story compared to tiny books. But I feel like this size range is especially for like a good sized adventure where you can really feel attached to the characters and also have a very clear understanding of the plot going on too, and feel like you can be invested in both without one sacrificing for the other due to like just the nature of how short the book is. So now we're at a length where I feel like neither of those things gets compromised at all, which is nice. And yeah, so let's just jump right in. The first book is probably the one I remember the least, but it is a childhood staple for a lot of people, and that is The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. This is, I feel like, a very vintage copy from when it was published in, I want to say the early 2000s, 2003. So I actually got this one at a book club exchange where we all packaged up a book that we owned that we no longer wanted, but that we wanted to give to someone else because we enjoyed it. So I didn't actually grow up with the Goose Girl. I know a lot of people did. And so this follows Princess Anidori. And from what I remember, very coming of age, but fantasy in trying to hone her identity and her voice in some ways, and her skill set. As you can imagine, it has to do with animals. And I just really liked that this felt like the nostalgia of fantasy that I grew up with, but a little more autonomous of a female protagonist, I would say, than like this genre time period type of book tends to have. Much more fleshed out female protagonist in this fantasy realm, and I really appreciated that. It is also a series, it's at least a trilogy. I never read the other ones, so let me know if I should reread this because I don't remember and read the other ones. I feel like it's one of those books that I really only know as like mainly the first book, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who read all of them as well. The second one is a trilogy and one I'm a lot more familiar with as I loved it in high school and then reread the first a couple years ago, and that is A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. A lot of people know her for her The Diviners series, which I have never read. This was what I found because of my sister and just wanting to read kind of that gothic yet modern atmosphere when I was a teenager. So this follows Gemma as she travels from India to the United Kingdom to go to a boarding school. And while she's at the boarding school, some strange supernatural-esque things start happening. So it's kind of this magical realism is not the correct word, but it's the idea that like you're entering fantasy through the real world, similar to Harry Potter. So I don't know if that has like a particular term, but it's that type of essence. The fantasy elements definitely expand as the series goes on, and it has a lot to do with friendship as well and coming of age, which I just enjoy reading. These are probably the most nostalgic coming of age books on the list for me in my actual coming of age. But there's also a little bit of romance, and overall it has a very like adventure feel, which I think is what I enjoy the most out of fantasy, when romance is not the center, but it's more just an adventure with a lot of different components wrapped into the adventure. So I feel like this is my best reference point for if you're going to have romance in fantasy. This had the correct amount for myself in my preferences. I'm not into romantasy. It's too much. But anyway, yes, I will be rereading book 2, Rebel Angels, in December as part of my 2026 TBR, and then I may or may not be going right into the third and final installment, the Sweetfar thing. Yeah, it was, this one didn't age as well, for sure. There was a little bit of racism, which was annoying, but all the other elements were cozy and exactly what I had hoped for them to be. So I will have to let you know if the second and or third is also problematic in any capacities. I'm curious how it evolves. I don't remember. Okay, the next one is the historical fiction of this list, and that is Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Water Dancer. This is the one I have all tabbed up with all the beautiful watercolors here. If you're curious, I will read you my tabs that I did. I love examining themes and how they intermingle throughout the story. So the dark blue tabs were my favorite quotes, just lines that I thought were really gorgeous. This book was just a very slow experience. This is a book that is much more of an experience than necessarily digging into a story, in my opinion. Ta-Nehisi Coates, of course, wrote Between the World and Me for his son, about being Black. And so what I really appreciated that he did in this book is a more modern author reflecting on slavery, which is what's going on in here, is that he said a lot of very blunt things that I think white people need to hear about slavery, because a lot of times, at least in my repertoire, a lot of books I've read reflecting on slavery are not Black authors. So I really appreciated how this added to the history narrative. Obviously, I know he's not the only Black author who's written on slavery in a fictional or non-fictional setting. But I really found the fictional setting to be really powerful, because it took magical realism. It took this element of, what if these people had been given some sort of escape in the midst of these atrocities and this dehumanization, and explored that. Even just the idea that water plays a huge role is fascinating spiritually to me as well. But this was a book where I just picked it up. I found it. I actually never intended to read it, but I found it in a book box, and I was like, I'm just randomly going to try this book. And only a couple pages in, I was crying. I just thought his writing was gorgeous. His descriptions were done so well and were so impactful. It was, at the time, like the most impactful thing I read in a really long time. And it wasn't just a story, but it was saying so many bold things that were so necessary. And I feel like all the more necessary in the current political climate in which we wade in every day. Nugget is here. Yeah, so I'm just going to read you some pieces. I'll read you the first quote that I loved that really made me feel like, number one, I need to annotate this, and number two, his writing is incredible. There I was, my own life dangling over the black pit, and now being called to save another. So he's with someone he was driving who is now trying not to drown. Sorry, my sticky note is hard to read under because it's so dark. I had, on many occasions, tried to teach Maynard to swim, and he took to this instruction as he took to all instruction, careless and remiss at the labor been sore and bigoted when this negligence bore no fruit. I can now say that slavery murdered him, that slavery made a child of him, and now dropped into a world where slavery held no sway. Maynard was dead the minute he touched water. I had always been his protection. It was I, only by good humor and debasement, who had kept Charles Lee from shooting him, and it was I, with special appeal to our father, who'd kept him countless times from wrath. And it was I who clothed him every morning, and I who put him to bed every night, and it was I who now was tired in both body and soul, and it was I out there wrestling against the pull of the current, against the fantastic events that had deposited me there, and now wrestling with the demand that I, once again, save another, when I could not even conjure the energy to save myself. You guys. And these gold stickies, I just wrote additional notes, which I almost never do when I annotate. I just have. And in this case, I put drowning equals blackness. The more you breathe, the world exhausts the life out of you. The agony of breath letting in pain. And that was page 7, and that was when I knew this was special, and is one of those books that, like, it doesn't even matter what the plot's about, it doesn't even matter who the characters are. I just immediately knew it was important, and that was one of the most powerful paragraphs I had read in I don't even know how long, and I just like forgotten the magic of precise writing and bold writing and unapologetic writing. And this book does that really, really well. So the favorite quotes. And then there's like a sky blue that I made water/blue as a theme, because I feel like water was never mentioned without intention. And so it was interesting to see how it was used throughout. There's more of a greenish blue, a turquoise, that I examined freedom with, and all of the ways and contexts in which freedom is brought up. And then, as you can imagine, I also wanted to do the opposite and look at bondage and all the ways and contexts through which bondage was brought up as well. This is the hard hitter that is so important on this list, and I just think everyone should read it. The next book is the book on this list I read the most recently, and that is S, or Ship of Theseus by V.M. Straka. This is also an experience, first and foremost. I'm not really going to page through because there's a lot of inserts in here that are part of the reading experience. And if you lose what page they're on, it's going to be a rough experience trying to figure out where they're supposed to go. So some people do take out all the inserts, label them with the page number, and just like, then they don't have to even think about that. I did not do that. But this is a mystery and dark academia feel. This was really nice for the winter time or the fall time. And there's 2 storylines going on. So this book itself is fictional. It is a book that the 2 protagonists find in their college's library and take turns checking out and pass notes and their annotations in it to one another. And that is Jen and Eric. They are studying this author. They're trying to figure out where this author went. The author's name is not the actual author's name, so they're trying to figure out who the author is exactly. And all of the characters are allegories for someone the author knows, so they're trying to decipher all of that, and you as the reader can help them decipher codes and notes going on. So there are, rather, to be grammatically correct, footnotes in this source material as well, and the translator who is doing the footnotes is the one kind of coding things into the book for the author to find, because they had a relationship but only via the written word, and so they were trying to communicate to one another through the printing of this source material, while not making it obvious to the average reader that they were trying to communicate. And so Eric and Jen are analyzing the footnotes and everything as well as you go throughout the book. The source material itself is a little bit Pirates of the Caribbean-esque. It is S, this character named S, who goes out onto the seas and has this like Davy Jones-esque experience of joining the ship crew. And then he comes to land at some point, and other chaos and adventures ensue, where he bonds more with some people, has some hardship, etc. But the primary storyline is Jen and Eric as they analyze this text and as they bond with one another who they've also never met and have only spoken to through the written word. I love how this story has so many moving pieces and elements. Some people might find it's too overwhelming, there's too many elements. I find the best way to read this book is one chapter at a time, read the source material with the footnotes first, and then go back to the beginning of the chapter and read Jen and Eric's annotations, / if there's any inserts, read those in your second read through of a chapter. I tried to do all of them at first, like pausing during the page to read the annotations, and it was way too overwhelming and probably would have made the reading experience like 10 times longer. So I feel like I actually reached a flow state in this book when I did the 2 read throughs of a chapter, one source material and then the second, the added notes. It's just the essence of what makes reading so beautiful and magical. This idea that, like, because of what this is, you have to read it physically. Like, an ebook doesn't really work, an audiobook doesn't really work. You need a physical copy. And then on top of that, just the different literary devices that are being used. This is like just for people who are obsessed with reading, are obsessed with the experience of getting to sit with a book for a long time because it's a longer book, and just really dig deeply into characters, into plot devices, into layers, and all the types of things a book can be doing and an author can be doing. And this is just a very vivid story because Doug Dorst is the author who penned this, but then he also co-created it with J.J. Abrams, who's a screen film director. And so there's that beautiful mix of visual storytelling that I can tell in the source material, while also a lot of good literature plot devices that Doug Dorst is bringing to the table. So this was a really cool multimedia experience, and I think it was super strong because it had both a filmmaker and an author behind the wheel. No pun intended. The next one is my all-time favorite author, and that is Markus Zusak. This is his lesser-known novel, Bridge of Clay. I have this very beautiful copy. I love the coloring, and I haven't actually read this exact edition that I have. This was given to me after I read it, but I have genuinely loved all 3 of his main novels. I've not read his first series that I think was maybe young adult, but this one is more like a family saga story, which I love. I love a good family saga. It's about 5 brothers, and it has a lot to do with family legacy. It also has a lot to do with animals and your love for pets and animals if you have them. And yeah, just we follow Clay, that is the protagonist, and it is also, I would say, there's a theme here. There's a lot of coming of age stories. He's digging into his family history, his familial relationships, while also building new relationships, both platonic and romantic, and just really finding his place literally in the earth and like how he wants to contribute to the world. The bridge plays a part. It's a literal bridge. I feel like there's a lot of metaphors here that I could probably continue to dig into more if I reread it again. I remember it was a little more slow moving than his other couple novels that I've loved. And so that was just a little more unexpected with his repertoire, that it seemed a little slower in pacing. But it still, I thought, was fantastic. And this is very much just like an experience of falling in love with characters. So if you're someone who loves characters and rooting for characters, this is going to be very emotive, and um, it's just very family centric and really cool. And um, I would say this is just like general fiction as a genre. It encompasses a lot of things, and that's why I love classics and general fiction. Because it's not trying to be anything specific. And so I feel like there's always a lot of surprises along the way of what it can do. So, yes, I really, really enjoy this one, and it would be a joy to reread, honestly. The next one is probably the most, or one of the most popular books on this list, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is a fantasy duology, so a lot of people might know her trilogy series that's set in the same world as Six of Crows, which is Shadow and Bone. I did not care for that series. That was written first, so her writing is a little more novice, and it showed. I thought the first book was tropey, but I enjoyed it. The second one, I was like, and then the third one, I actually DNF'd because somehow it just like got worse as the series went on. It was a lot of just like traveling, and I'm like, this is book 3, and I don't know why this is so boring. That feels wrong to me. Six of Crows was written later, and it's about like a group of misfits. The setting is like this huge trade hub in the world, so it's like very bustling and busy, and you're plopped into it right away. So you're just immersed in this fantasy world with all of these surrounding cities, trade and commerce, and all this stuff. And the general plot is centered around a heist. So it's like a fantasy heist, and I love a good heist story. I've I love a good heist movie. I love a good heist in any genre. And so this was my first fantasy heist, and it did not disappoint. It was really well paced. There's a lot of sass and wit amongst the characters, and Inej is by far my favorite character. Petite woman representation, I just always love to see it. It makes me so happy every single time, but not in the like unhealthy way that a lot of romance books do it. Inej is just, she's a boss. She gets it done, and I just love how all of these characters bounce off one another, and a lot of them kind of push each other to be stronger in their weaknesses because they kind of complement each other a lot. I feel like this is one you really don't have to know too much about. It's just going to be an adventure. It's going to be humorous. It's going to be like everything you could want out of an adventure. So I think you should just pick it up if you haven't already. I think most people have read this. And it's now, of course, a combined Netflix show, which is a strange choice to me. But I guess if you really love the world that all of these books are set in, maybe it was a good choice. I actually never finished the show, so I can't really give a full opinion. If you didn't like Shadow and Bone, you should try Six of Crows, and I think you would be surprised that you like it a lot more. This one I also read in the past few months, and that was Babel by R.F. Kuang. This was like my type of book. Ironically, I gave it 4 stars, not 5 stars. It was still really good. But what I mean by that is I like a book that has a plot, has a story, but really underneath it, it has a lot to say about either sociology, culture, or psychology, or maybe even all of them. And yes, Babel did not disappoint. We follow our protagonist Robin as he gets rescued out of China from deadly illness going around, and he then grows up with this white mentor in the United Kingdom. Is quickly westernized. You quickly I don't even think we ever knew his real name. And the rate of westernization in and of itself in his story is like jarring and kind of horrifying, how easily people can lose their identity and their origins, because I know that's real. Like, that's not just a story. And so he grows up and gets educated in the Western world, and then he gets sent off to a fantasy version of Oxford. And so in this fantasy version of Oxford, they have this tower, Babel, how scriptural, that is the tower for all the translation students. And so he goes into translation. He's been learning all about, words. And yeah, it has a lot to do with imperialism, as you can imagine. There's so many meditations throughout and so many character tensions throughout that poke at racism and internalized phobias or prejudices that different people can have, um, usually white people. And then it also, of course, is speaking and meditating a lot on translation, the act of translation. And as someone who loves to read, I loved getting to meditate on the act of translation and where's the line between helping more people have access to stories and things versus, like, is it worth potentially altering what the meaning was supposed to be by the original author? And like, where's the line there between shared resources versus stealing, and just so many different layers for so many different things, amidst cultures, and also just the fact that we can't be fully independent. We are, as an entire species, we are dependent beings, and so to an extent, like, we do need one another, whether we hate each other's guts or not. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of good meditations in here, and the story itself was really weirdly paced. That was definitely its weakness, but I found by the end I was enjoying it a lot more. There's 5 books throughout the book, and book 2 to me was the most preachy and poorly written, but it does pick up after book 2, so some people might really get thrown by book 2 and really dislike it in that part. Some people have a lot of different opinions on where she took the characters. Some people think she's way too on the nose with a lot of thoughts and a lot of themes. But in my opinion, I would say, like, the whole point is to get people's gears turning, to not assume people have any sort of knowledge necessarily. So I think it was effective. If you know more, you know more. It's probably gonna feel more rudimentary, but I really like that it just forced you to be meditative instead of just thinking about the story and getting lost in the story. She really encouraged people to map what was going on in the story onto their own lives, onto the world around you. And just like Suzanne Collins, I think that's one of the coolest things that literature can do, one of the most important things that it can do. So I think Babel is another really good one, to really meditate on your own culture and how it intersects with other cultures, how it behaves towards other cultures, and how you feel about that. How does that make you feel? How does your history make you feel? How does the current moment make you feel? And what does that mean for your actions and your relationships going forward? Really important. The next book is the classic of the list, and it's very well known, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I could have sworn I had a copy. I definitely did during college, but I guess I gave it away because I cannot seem to find it. Jane Eyre is also a coming of age, but I would say Jane Eyre is more recommended from that Victorian era than Jane Austen, in that she's, yes, the protagonist is a woman, but I feel like it's not as feminine as Jane Austen's works that are a little more like just romantic. I would say Jane Eyre is a lot more about women in culture and coming into their own as a whole, and that's something that men would really appreciate as well. We see Jane as a girl, and then we also see her into young adulthood, and I think it just does a really good job of Jane assessing her relationships, changing her heart, working through her own opinions and beliefs, and really learning how to advocate for herself, which is something that everyone needs to learn to do. And so I just think it's a cool story where you get to come alongside someone for like a large chunk or passage of time of their life and see the ways that they grow over time, just like you would with a friend or a family member. So this is very much like just watching someone learn how to flourish in their life. And I think that's just an experience that's very enjoyable and very empowering and very encouraging if that's ever something that you struggle with. So Jane Eyre is a fantastic example of coming into your own and really owning what being yourself means. And then the final book is the one all-time favorite of mine that is on this list. And like I said, my favorite author is Markus Zusak, and this is by far his most popular work. So a lot of you may have already read it, but it always bears repeating, and that is The Book Thief. This is, oh, I lied, this is the other historical fiction. There's two on this list, which is rare for me. I don't read a ton of historical fiction. This takes place in Germany during the Nazi reign, and the narrator of this book, if you don't already know, is Death. Death is the narrator. Death is talking to the reader in the prologue, and you just know you're going to go through such a roller coaster. But the way it's done is so beautiful. We are following Liesel and her family as they decide how to sit in the atrocities that were Nazi Germany and how they wanted to respond and react to the world around them. And they end up taking in a Jewish man. And it is just, it's everything. There's so much in this book. The love of reading and the love of writing is also in this book as Liesel grows her relationships, and she has this great friend Rudy that she grows up with, and he really wants to be like Jesse Owens and be this fantastic runner. This is like the book I've read that I think I've told every single person in my family to read, even though we have very diverse reading tastes. So this is like a book that defies reading tastes that I genuinely think everyone can appreciate. And what I like the most about this book, a couple things. The rawness of emotion in so many different ways for so many different reasons is probably the strength of this book. This book wants you to feel very deeply, and it's so pivotal and it's so important to every single element of this book. This is not for numb people. This is to really make you sit with pain and atrocity. And it's so entrancing because as soon as you start reading Marcus Zuzak, you'll see he has the most unique way of writing where he puts verbs and adjectives together in ways I hadn't seen before. He has such a memorable voice because he's not just using words, but he's finding creative ways to use words, not just because he's creatively writing, but he will toss different subjects and actions together in ways I've just never seen them done, and it just makes for the most fascinating visuals that I could never have come up with myself. And it is a book that feels a little multimedia. Like sometimes there's passages that look like this, where there's like an interruption to the main body of the book, and there's also some illustrations here and there throughout the book. If I can find one, guess there's not too many. But here's one illustration. Yeah, Marcus Zuzak, I love that all of his books are so different, but the thread that holds them all together is his writing is so cool. His writing just does things I never see anyone else's writing do, and it defies genres because every single one of his books is a different genre. So there's no better book that I could possibly end this recommendation list with. And I love gold, so gotta love that. Thank you for joining, as I'm very impassioned about a lot of these. I think they're all really good adventures and stories, and this makes me really want to read like right now because I have been at a lack of reading for quite a few weeks now. So I'm excited to get back into reading, and I'm actually going to be starting a vlog later tonight. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're reading some good books. Let me know if you have any books in this page range that you think are really well done for being this exact length. Like this length feels like the exact length it should be, and longer or shorter would just not do it justice. And yeah, I am excited to continue to read so many good books of all varying lengths, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye, friends.